Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Bryce Simon and a special guest are going to join me to discuss the fact that the Indiana Pacers are in the NBA Finals and the New York Knicks are no longer in the playoffs. We're going to preview the NBA Finals, the Oklahoma City Thunder against the Indiana Pacers, and talk a little bit about how Indiana got here. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What is this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? How are you? I'm like trying to figure out your fit right now. We got Indiana State with the Pirates hat. Like, you just repping across the board right here. I obviously know the story behind the Pirates hat. I feel like you've told the Indiana State story before, but I guess I'm getting old and forgetful.
Oh no, honestly, it's just a sick hoodie.
Okay,
we love home field here at the Game Theory Podcast. Home field, come sponsor the show. Like, I promise I'm a huge fan of your products. Come sponsor. And like, Indiana State's a sick brand. We're all for it. And you know, today the Indiana Pacers are in the NBA Finals.
There you go.
You know, I decided to go with the Pacers color scheme with the yellow at the top and then rep Indiana on the shirt. That was the plan today. We'll see if it ended up working out. Color clash, but what can you do? Bryce.
I mean, you spend a lot more time thinking because I have a hole in my shirt here for our live episode. So I spent a whole lot of time thinking about what I was going to wear.
You're Belichicking over here is what's happening.
Yeah, I love it.
You know, good thing is that we're not the CBS morning show necessarily. Bryce, the Indiana Pacers are in the NBA Finals following a 125-108 victory over the New York Knicks yesterday. I don't know, man. It felt like after game one happened in this series that it was kind of fait accompli a little bit to me. As much as I wanted this thing to be wildly competitive, and there were games within this series that were incredibly wildly competitive and so fun, including game one. Game two was game four, the one that the Knicks won to bring. No, game three was. Game three was the one that the Knicks won to bring it back. It did just feel like it was going to be hard for the Knicks after game one. And that was for a myriad reasons, from like the heartbreak of it and being able to rebound from that to just the pressure that Indiana puts on them consistently on a possession by possession basis defensively. And game six was no different, I guess is what I would say. Because on one hand, I felt like the biggest issue was exactly what we said we thought it would be when we came into the series. It was transition pickups. It was matching in transition. It was, frankly, like court balance, even more than the other games. I felt like game six was like a court balance game where like Karl Anthony Towns was, you know, constantly like diving for offensive rebounds as opposed to getting back in transition. And they always had guys, like too many guys way below the free throw line offensively. And then when the Pacers would go and get a defensive rebound, it would just be curtains, it felt like to me. So like the problems were slightly different in game six, but the end result was the same, that it just felt very difficult for the Knicks to match up in transition. And that, you know, was what we talked about going in. Now, what we talked about going in also was that we didn't love the Andrew Nembhard match up against Jalen Brunson. And honestly, like, Jalen caught him for a large portion of the series, but
not last night, Sam. Not last night.
Last night was enormous stuff from Andrew Nembhard. Nembhard made Brunson's life miserable. He was a fantastic defender. And I adore every single thing about this Indiana Pacers team. I do. They are what, we'll talk about it both from like a team building perspective and from an overall perspective about like what they mean for basketball. But I just love this basketball team unconditionally.
Nembhard was awesome. He was awesome last night. And I'm glad you brought that up because we had talked about how we didn't love that matchup. We didn't think it was going to work. Brunson had gone for 43, 36, 23, 31, 32 in this series going into game 6. And, he had a game where he was, game 3, which they actually won. He went 6 of 18, but 8 of 18, 2 of 7 from 3, 19 points, 5 turnovers. Nembhard was absolutely incredible. He wasn't the MVP for the Eastern Conference Finals for the Pacers. Like, you can debate that, Siakam versus Hallie, like whatever. I thought he was the MVP in game 6. I thought he set the tone. And another player I want to give credit to defensively is Pascal Siakam. I came on after game 5 and I did, kind of call out 2 things. One was Pascal's defense on Karl Anthony Towns, and then the other one was Tyrese Halliburton, which we'll talk about as well. I thought Pascal absolutely had an awesome game, and I thought Siakam's defense on Cat, just the intensity and the way he was playing him, how he was locked in, and then Nembhard's defense on Brunson after, like, that wasn't the plan going into game 6, right? Like, Naismith gets in foul trouble, and it was not necessarily by design, but by necessity because they had to go to him, and he was just awesome, picking up full court, all of that. And then the other thing I want to shout out as we get into this, you can pace after make, Sam. Like, I do not want to hear people tell me anymore that the only way to push pace is to get stops and force turnovers. Indiana multiple times, and yes, the Knicks were part of this, but I've seen them do it to other teams as well. Multiple times after make, they get a cross match, they get 3-point attempts, they get layups. It's after free throw situations. This is what when we say identity, this is what we're talking about, right? A team has an identity that you can easily identify and see. And it's no more identifiable to me that the Pacers push pace that puts you in tough spots than when they do it after a make, after a dead ball, even like when the other team's still walking back after free throw situations. They never stop. They just are relentless in how they attack you.
Pascal Siakam wins Eastern Conference Finals MVP. You brought up Siakam defensively. I mean, he drops 31 as well in this game offensively. Goes 31, 5, and 3 with 3 blocks, plus 25 on the night. The starters between the Nembhard, Halliburton, and Siakam minutes were just outstanding. I have no notes basically across the board. Look, I probably would have voted Halliburton for Eastern Conference Finals MVP. I just think that he is so intrinsic to everything that they do on both ends of the court. Like, he is their identity in so many different ways. And the passing, the playmaking, it's infectious. The ball movement is infectious. And this is not a slight at Siakam. I thought Siakam was amazing. And if people want to vote for Siakam for this thing, I'm just not going to argue really with it. I'm not going to put up a fight. I probably would have voted Halliburton. I think it's just an amazing story that Siakam now gets this award in his shelf, and it's well-deserved for a guy that has absolutely worked his balls off for every single thing that he's gotten throughout the course of his career, going back to New Mexico State. So I'm such a fan of this entire operation.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to sit here and make an argument for one guy or the other. I thought Siakam was a great performance on both ends of the floor. I will also say it, and I don't want people to mistake this for an argument for Tyrese defensively being more important than Siakam. He absolutely was not. Siakam was taking more important matchups, all of that. I thought this was another game where Tyrese's defense was impactful, and it's not it's not the point of attack stuff all the time, but he was disruptive. He found ways to be disruptive. And again, this is a long leap, but in the way that people give Dyson Daniels credit for creating disruption that leads to transition, Halliburton, in not nearly the same impact, not nearly the same level. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying Halliburton jumps passing lanes. He digs. He does little things that then also lead to transition that plays right into the style of offensive play. I just think Tyrese has really grown on the defensive end in regards to that. We know he's not the best point of attack guy. We know he's not the strongest guy, and he's going to give up some things in that way. But finding a way to make an impact in other ways is important with the way he gives multiple efforts and closes out and all of that stuff. I just think it was a solid effort on that end from Tyrese and something he's really taken strides with as well. And I'll be honest, Sam, I was worried. I actually was going to track this, how many times he turned down shots in this game, because I wanted to see how, if I was just seeing things. I counted 3 in the first 6 minutes of the game, and all of those possessions ended up in negatives for the Pacers. And then I thought his mentality shifted and he was in the right mental space the rest of the game.
Yeah, completely agree. I guess the thing I want to move to now before we move to the Knicks is just how the Pacers like built this unlike any other situation. Like we talked about how the Thunder built their team, obviously, in the last episode. And in some ways it is like similar in regard to how the Pacers built this. They built it off the back of like a massive star trade for a younger player that they just evaluated better than the rest of the league, right? Maybe not better than the rest of the league in Tyrese's case. I think we understood that Tyrese was quite good, and the Kings just made like an abominable decision in a lot of ways to trade, Halliburton for Sabonis, especially when Halliburton like was so publicly strong that he wanted to like be there and be the guy that like brought glory back to the Kings franchise. But I will say that like even beyond that deal, it's just that their evaluation of players has been so obscenely good and so obscenely sharp and pointed that I'm not sure I can remember a team basically since that Halliburton deal hitting on this many like hits like in a row almost. Like they get Neesmith for Malcolm Brogdon, who was like an expiring deal, send him to Boston, right? Yep. They get Obi Toppin for like a late second round pick. Toppin's not like, some starting level player right now, but he's a super valuable, useful piece of their machine.
He was good in game 6, Sam. He played
awesome in game 6.
An important 25 minutes. And while we're on it, a big minutes from Thomas Bryant as well. Like that center position situation is a little bit of a disaster. And we'll talk about that in the preview. Thomas Bryant was huge in game 6.
Yeah, Toppin at 18 points in 25 minutes, went 7 of 11 from the field. And again, like the thing that they do better than anybody is they figure out what's going to fit their identity. It's them, honestly, more than any other 2 teams in the league right now. I think I can say this about. The Thunder and the Pacers, from a front office perspective, pick the players that are going to fit their identity and how they want to play. Nailing the Andrew Nembhard pick, right? Nembhard played super up-tempo at Gonzaga. They evaluated the defense better than anybody. Like I did not see a great defender at Gonzaga. Honestly, I didn't see like a particularly positive defender at Gonzaga. And he has turned into an absolute menace on that end. And that's a evaluation. I mean, truly just based on the tape, because like I even went back a little bit last night and it was like, did I like miss something here at Gonzaga? Right. They had to have just evaluated the human more than anything. And that's a big key here too. They evaluate the human. They figure out, okay, Aaron Neesmith is going to be the toughest dude in the building, right? He's going to be willing to sit down and like work to keep his NBA career, and he's going to sit down on defense and be tough. Andrew Nembhard is going to be willing to sit down and defend in a way that he just hasn't at Gonzaga or at Florida, right? And then you nail the Siakam deal. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I loved the Siakam deal at the time is A, like you get a great player for not an enormous price, right? But B, you go out and you get a player that fits your exact scheme that you want to play under Halliburton. You want to play up-tempo. You want to create mismatches. Siakam does that to a T. It's perfect. And then you have Miles Turner, who this front office, I don't even think they drafted him. I mean, like this Turner's been there for a decade now. I think that it was the past front office that did it, but they nailed it. Like Turner becoming a incredibly valuable, like 3-and-D center. It's just such a huge value add who lifts the rest of your organization through his presence because of that ability to space the floor, because of that ability to protect the basket on defense. And he didn't even have a great series because Towns kind of worked him.
Yeah.
but you still saw the value of having him on the court. I mean, you can go up and down the list, like even the guys that they like, the guys that haven't hit yet, Ben Mather and Jarris Walker. You can see how those two guys would fit within this structure of playing up tempo, playing quicker. They're so smart and so sharp at selecting the guys that fit what they want to do. And this is why it drives me crazy when people say, oh no, you just have to draft the best player available. Oh no, you like whoever the best player is on my board that's in a vacuum is the obvious pick. That's not true at all. The best pick is you should take the best player on your board 100%. But every board should look quite different.
Yep.
Depending on situation, depending on scheme, depending on what things look like for your team and your organization.
Yep.
And the Pacers have done an amazing job of evaluating what is important for their team and their organization.
It's a really good point. And we've talked about this where individual boards for teams should look entirely different, because if you're the Indiana Pacers and some player is like, very ball dominant or doesn't want to play with pace or, whatever it is, then it's like, well, is that guy going to come there and be successful? It's not a good situation for him. It's not good a situation for your team either. And so I think that's where it definitely is important. And we've talked about this with the Pacers so much, just having that identity from the top down, understanding who you are, who you want to be as an organization. Is your GM and front office on board with that? Is your coach on board with that? Okay, well, now you can find success with those things. And like Siakam is the perfect one for me, because I'm not sure I quite understood it at the time. And every game I watch now, I'm like, he is perfect. He is absolutely perfect. He is so good on the defensive end, making sure his team secures the ball. And then as soon as they secure the ball, he's gone. He is out of there. Yep. And then on top of that, Sam, he can either catch in transition and score, or he can post you up. Like he'll duck you in transition or seal you high side. And then he also gives you some isolation opportunities in the half court when the game does slow down. Like just identifying that player. And also, and I think Siakam said this when the trade happened, knowing that fits really well with Miles Turner, right? Because you can't post Siakam up in the half court if your big man is standing on the other block. It doesn't work correctly. But Miles Turner can go stand in the corner or the top of the key or wherever and take his man out of the way. So those things flow together so well. And I've made this point before. Watching Obi Toppin post and duck in mismatches in the same way that Siakam does and Turner does, it just tells me that it's a culture thing in Indiana. If you were a 4 or 5 for our team, you are going to run in transition. If you don't catch it, you can post up. And if you get a switch, try to duck in and post up that switch. And I'm not saying they should run offense through Obi Toppin, but it just, when I saw it, it clicked. Like even Obi's doing it. Even Tony Bradley, who's just randomly playing all of a sudden in the playoffs, is doing it. Yeah. It's a culture and a system that they know exactly what they're doing. They get everybody to buy into it and do it.
And look, this is where, Rick Carlisle deserves such an immense amount of credit. The scheme he's developed around Halliburton, the willingness to just go fully up tempo with this group, the way that he has clearly taught, and the way that this coaching staff in general has clearly taught this team how to space, why to space, where to space, right? How you go about doing this. It's enormous. Like it is such a critical part of how this team has success to me, is just the way that they go about building. Like it's a lot of motion principles. It's a lot of like, they will run set plays. They do a lot of different things to try and find different advantages. And, the thing that we talked about after game 2, if I remember correctly, is just that this was a massive mismatch in terms of the coaching in this series with the Knicks because of the intentionality of the Indiana Pacers. They are so intentional in how they find their mismatches.
It's funny you say that. Sorry, GMAC. I felt pretty good the Pacers were going to win game 6 when I saw the very first action that they ran to start the game, which was a Naismith. It was actually a Siakam Naismith. Siakam had the ball. Aaron Naismith comes and sets the ball screen, and it was very intentional because guess who guards those two guys to start the game? Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. And I'm like, yep, Carlisle locked in for this game. He knows exactly. And listen, it was one play, it was one possession, but it was just like, to me, there was just that it sent a message that we are going to be very intentional in who we attack and how, because we called that out a little bit in game 5, right? We didn't feel like they were as intentional as what we feel like they usually are. And I saw that on the opening possession and I said, uh-oh, like if they make shots tonight, if they're really locked in, if there's not some outlier or something, it seems like they're ready to go. And that's kind of how it played out. I will also quickly say the names you brought up in like those trades and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting going to like see what they did with their teams before they came to Indiana and then what they blossomed into. And a lot of it was younger players, right? Like Tyrese had what, a year and a half, Neesmith 2, McConnell and Toppin a little bit more, but just like they came to Indiana and not all of them flourished, but the production and the impact went up with Indiana. And so my point being, they identified guys that maybe were a little underappreciated or evaluated by their own team, by the league in general or whatever, and identified them as players that would fit in their system. And as we talked about, NBA scouting is not talked about enough. We spend so much time talking about NBA draft scouting. Scouting the rest of the league is so important.
And there's also a little bit of a luck factor here that we need to bring up.
Very true. Fair enough.
Do you remember 3 summers ago what the Indiana Pacers did?
No. So I have to
They gave a max contract in restricted free agency to DeAndre Ayton.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Which if the Suns choose not to match that, or if they, try to force a sign and trade with Miles Turner, I'm not convinced that the Pacers are here because the fit with Siakam would not be great. So I don't know if Siakam is the guy that they target. They probably do everything else, but like, it's just harder to create the mismatches that they do if you replace Miles Turner with DeAndre Ayton. And this is back when people thought Ayton had like real upside. And maybe if you get him into a totally different system and you get him up tempo with Tyrese Halliburton, that like things would have been totally different for his career. I'll hear that out, to be honest with you, but I don't think they're here. So it takes luck at the end of the day too. And maybe that was just them doing, Bill Duffy and, Neiman Makian a favor and making sure that he got maxed and they knew the Suns were going to match and, they knew that it was going to be a thing, right? Like it's very possible that that's what this was. But at the end of the day, they also got a little bit lucky here that the Suns chose to match that immediately on DeAndre Ayton. And that's a huge factor here too.
I mean, I think that's across the board. I'm sure you could pinpoint those things with about any team, right? And it's not to take away from them. I do this with my own teams I played on. I won 2 conference championships and played in 2 NCAA tournaments, Sam. Like there was luck along the way with either another team getting injured or our team not getting injured or the ball bounced to certain, whatever. Like most champions have some level of that. Now you put yourself in those opportunities and then you take advantage of them and all of that. This is not to discount. It's to say that like, if we're going to do that, then I think it's the same thing with the Thunder we brought up, right? Like, yes, they had Paul George. They just happened to have the player that Kawhi Leonard wanted to play with, right? Like, and no, they had done things to have Paul George on their team and all of that. But it's like, well, if Kawhi decides he wants somebody else, does SGA land up in Oklahoma City or is SGA playing for Team X, right? And so there's always a little bit of like, this opportunities will present it a little bit better to you or whatever, or maybe something happens where you were going to make a bad decision, but the plug gets pulled because of whatever. So I think that's across the board. And I had not thought of that though. That's a great call. Cause that wasn't on my radar at all. So
yeah. Okay. Before we get into talking about the Knicks real quick and the NBA Finals preview, we got to hit some sponsors. Shout out to our good friends over at PrizePicks. Do you know ball? There's only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the absolute best place to win cash while watching sports. This year's basketball playoffs are headed toward crowning a first-time champ, and you can join millions of users and sign up today and become a first-time champ yourself over on PrizePicks. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite basketball players with players from basketball, hockey, esports, and so much more every Tuesday. PrizePicks discounts several player projections on the board, usually by 15 to 25%. Fridays are Flex Fridays. Make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in your lineup builder to be eligible for the protected play. You can choose squares from any game on the board. If your lineup does not win, you get your net losses back in promo funds up to the promo limit as soon as the lineup settles. Bryce, you better believe I've got picks here for game 1 of the NBA Finals. We've got Chet Holmgren making over 0.5 threes.
Okay.
We've got Alex Caruso making over 0.5 threes. I bet they're going to leave him open, would be my theory when he plays. And then I've got over 17.5 for Tyrese Halliburton because, win or lose for the Pacers, I feel like he's going to have to come out and kind of set a tone here.
Wait, how many?
Game 1, 17.5
points. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's probably averaging 18 or 19 in the playoffs. Nothing crazy. You know what I mean? And if you get all 3 of those, you're going to win 2.5 times the amount that you put in. It feels like a good one to me. It feels like a winner. Download the app today and use the code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use the code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Also, we're going to shout out the good folks over at LinkedIn. As a small business owner, you do not have the luxury of clocking out early. Your business is on your mind 24/7. So when you're hiring, you need a partner that grinds just as hard as you do. That hiring partner is LinkedIn Jobs. When you clock out, LinkedIn is going to clock in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates that you can manage all in one place. Look, if you've ever hired I did last summer when I brought in GMAC, you know that hiring is important. And now this show probably would not survive without GMAC. So I'm telling you, hiring is the most essential thing that you can do. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write those job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. You can find your qualified candidates. And at the end of the day, the most important thing to the small business is the quality of your candidates. I can absolutely attest to that. Based on LinkedIn data, 72% of small businesses using LinkedIn say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality candidates. Find out why more than 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today. Find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/game. That's LinkedIn, let's restart. LinkedIn.com/game, GAME, to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay. Speaking of the man, we got to get GMAC up here to talk about the New York Knickerbockers. He's very sad, very disconcerted. And we have a super chat for Andrew here already. GMAC, what kind of wine should I gift you to drown your sorrows in? From Brian Garces. Shout out to Brian Garces.
Hold on real quick. It's GMAC. Brian, the Pistons lost in the playoff too. You didn't offer me any wine. This is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking.
Nothing for Bryce. Nothing at all. Brian, I'll take a red. I don't drink, so that's the thing. It's for my wife. It'll be a nice red. I think that's the type of wine she drinks. Fellas, it's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks. Been a while. How have you guys been? Anything new in your lives? Any non-life-altering, soul-crushing Game 1 collapses that you were live on playback for that you had to witness? And anything like that happen to you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've started a new preview series here. It's not like you've had to edit and figure all of those out scheduling wise while in the middle of a soul-crushing playoff
at least
series.
The Blazers one was very concise, GMAC. It's not like
gosh.
It's not like the Blazers one ended up being a full live recording episode.
I gotta say,
speaking of which, by the way, the Blazers one is the longest one we've recorded so far. It's over 50 minutes. That comes out tomorrow.
Buckle up, folks. 53 minutes of do you or do you not believe in Tamani Kamara? Look, they've actually been welcome distractions. The Game Theory offseason previews, which everybody go check it out. We have a nice playlist on the Game Theory homepage, YouTube channel, if you want to check it out. Because look, I want to start here, and this seems to be a very unpopular opinion in Knicks land, and we'll break down the Knicks angle of this series and what the Pacers did. You guys did a good job of what the Pacers did that the Knicks didn't. So I'll say what the Knicks didn't from this angle, and we'll talk about that in a second. The Knicks made the conference finals for the first time in 25 years.
Yeah.
The entire conversation about this team for the majority of this year is who they can't beat, and they got to the conference finals by dethroning the defending champs. And if one person brings up Jason Tatum's injury, which was a tragedy, it happened when they were down 9 in the fourth quarter of Game 4. They were about to go down 3-1. Then the Knicks blew them out in Game 6, and those 4 days in New York City are some of the happiest 4 days I've ever had as a sports fan. And you see me wearing a Mets hat right now, right, fellas? I don't know if you guys know this. I like baseball. I like the New York Mets. I went to Mets versus Yankees the day after the Mets clinched. Excuse me, the Knicks clinched. Wishing that into the future. The day after the Knicks beat the Celtics, I went to Mets against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. The Mets won, and I started high-fiving some Yankee fans. But I was wearing a Knicks hat. And you know who else high-fived me? A Yankee fan. Because he was like, hey, we got the Knicks, though. Hell yeah. And loud Jalen Brunson chants started raining through Yankee Stadium as I was leaving. So as frustrating as this series ended up being, especially after Game 1, they cannot take away this team that has moments of unseriousness that we talked about, Bryce, all throughout the Pistons series. They were not able to completely erase the good vibes of this run and what those 4 days were, even though as we transition to talking about what they did in the conference finals, boy, did they try. Boy, did they try to erase all of it with how they played in this series, how they coached in this series, how all of it. But I will still leave this series, this playoffs altogether, with a positive outlook on what the Knicks did this season.
Yeah, like you might have Juan Soto, but I have Andrew Heaney. So who cares? You know what I mean? So it's fine. Right?
Yeah, Soto heating up. By the way, the only baseball note I'll say, Bryce, the Rockies are 9-50. 9-50. That's really bad.
It sounds like the
9-50.
Sounds like the 23-24 Pistons is what that sounds like.
It's worse. It's worse.
It's actually like genuinely worse. Yeah.
It'd be like if a team was, well, okay, you know what? They were 3-33 at one point. So actually that might actually be the 24 Pistons. But regardless.
Yeah, real bad.
Yeah, really bad.
Okay. So I think where I want to start this is I'm glad you gave that overall overarching view of positivity in terms of the city, because that's ultimately like, we're going to talk about the future and we're going to talk about all this, and what they do moving forward. And it matters. It's important. But I do want to at least like acknowledge how amazing it was to like get the Chalamet vibes, center court or at the baseline in Indiana. Ben Stiller, just an icon, an absolute icon. Spike Lee, an absolute icon. Getting those guys like back in our lives, making sure that the New York Knicks are great again on some level, right? I genuinely believe that basketball is better when the New York Knicks are great. The vibes at Madison Square Garden, the vibes of the overall NBA as a whole are better because Knicks fans, I love you to death. You're all crazy.
Yes.
And you're all insane. And you're insane in the best possible way. You care about this team so much. You so desperately want a winner that you cultivate this like aura of excitement and enthusiasm for your organization that I think is genuinely just different than it is for other teams around the league. So it is really important to me that Andrew acknowledged at the top that the vibe of the city just shifted in such a way. I think the vibe of like the NBA almost, and like the national conversation around like the NBA shifted because of the Knicks. Where they go from here, we'll see. And now it's probably time to shift into the future. But I truly do love like the New York Knicks and their fan base and everything that they do. I don't love James Dolan for many reasons, but outside of that situation, I think that this team, like basketball, is just better with them involved. So now moving forward,
can I ask? I want to ask GMAC just one question, real quick. You alluded to it. I think I know where your answer is, but in general, because I thought about this today. Because I was like, you let me moonlight over at Knicks Film School, which I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate. I've had people reach out, bigger names in the space. They're like, hey, I like what you did over there, all of that. So you guys gave me a real opportunity to grow myself, my brand, whatever. I don't have a brand, but you know what I mean. But my thought was like, if you would have told me they were going to lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, give me nothing else, because here's the problem is I think it's because of who they lost to, but it's like, if nothing else, I'm like, you probably take that as a Knicks fan, right? Like Eastern Conference Finals game. So my question to you is, if I told you that preseason, would you have taken it? Would you have thought that was a successful season? And the Knicks fan base at large, if you gave them truth serum, take the emotions out of it, do you think they would have felt like that was a successful season?
Look at Bryce doing a journalism here. This is a good question.
Isn't this great? Is this a great question from Knicks Film School contributor Bryce Simon, who killed it with his film breakdown.
So here, real quick,
what's playoffs?
I was so sad when they would lose because the Knicks fan base is so crazy. They wouldn't watch the videos when they lost. I was like, this sucks. Because the first time it happened, I'm like, man, they must not like my videos. And then they won, and I did a video, and I'm like, oh, no. They just refuse. And we talked about it before we recorded. My favorite comment is a guy going, the ultimatum or whatever, you might be able to pull the actual quote is watching a Bryce Simon video breakdown or watching the Knicks blow the game 1 lead again. I was like, that's the best compliment I've ever got.
It was like the overall dilemma because the video breakdown you did, it was, let's revisit the last 3 minutes of game 1.
In fairness, I showed in the first minute of the breakdown how they got the lead before they got rid of the lead.
So the dilemma of watching a Bryce Simon film breakdown versus watching this horror show again. To answer your question, Bryce, and it's funny because my dad actually asked me and asked the Knicks Film School, our faculty over there, would losing to the Pacers erase? He asked this, I think, Tuesday, so the day before the conference finals. Would losing to the Pacers erase this feeling that we have right now, that you all are clearly showing, that are expressing, and the vibe of beating Boston and what's going on in the city? Would beating the Pacers erase that? And I said in that moment, absolutely not. Nothing will ever take away that Friday night beating Boston. I will say the how does matter. And it's why game 1 went a long way toward potentially erasing it. And then some of the different things and some of the frustrations that I had throughout the season, that a lot of us had throughout the season, rear their ugly head throughout this series. And it's why there are some Knicks fans that were like, I wish we had lost to Boston, because then they probably get a new head coach and maybe make wholesale changes, and the ups and downs and mood swings of a fan. It's short for fanatic for a reason. I personally am choosing to look at, to your point, where I thought this team would be before the season. And if you told me, I was doing I was having like a little Knicks Film School meeting with somebody, and he looked up at one moment and said, the Knicks are 6 wins away from a title. Like, let's just think about this. The New York Knicks, where we were in the 2010s, where we were in the 2000s. And to your point, Sam, we are a James Dolan owned franchise, and we're 6 wins away from a title. That has to be like put to all the context. I know there are a lot of younger Knicks fans You and all the lack of PTSD that you have. God bless you that you don't have any frustrations of watching Aaron Aflalo or Chris Duhon or Enes Kanter or literally anybody that you
shout out Jerome James, baby.
Right, like the Channing Frys, like shout out to the picks that you thought that were the franchise changers that ended up going elsewhere and being contributors or just not panning out here. And they were
the Andrea Bargnani era is real.
Man, that just hurt. The Andrea Bargnani era is very, very, very stress inducing.
So do you remember that Derek Fisher was the head coach of the New York Knicks?
You know who lost out? Who he was the consolidation coach to? It was Steve Kerr. It was Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr chose either the Knicks or the Warriors, and he chose the Warriors because Phil Jackson wasn't willing to give him 5 years. So Phil Jackson,
guys, there were years where they had Carmelo Anthony, where Langston Galloway was arguably the second best player on the team.
Yep. Shout out to Tony Douglas.
And shout out Langston Galloway. Fought his ass off for his career.
Yep.
Like
Bill
really
Walker,
worked hard.
Ronnie Turiaf.
Yeah.
So that I think, Bryce, to your point, is like there is a divide in the generations of Knicks fans here where there's the ones that are like, I'm going to be 37. I have a memory of what it was like toward the end of the 90s when they were really good and in the playoffs every year. And we rolled out of bed and they were in at least the second round. And then there's the entire century that they went through where outside of 1 to 2 Carmelo Anthony led years, it's been dire. So we appreciate anything that we're happening right now. Then there's the younger Knicks fan that their first favorite Knick was Kristaps Porzingis and their second favorite Knick was RJ Barrett. And the scars and the wounds of what they went through just don't apply. And so
these kids remember the Ron Baker era. Shout out Kansas
right
legend.
They have no memory of Lance Thomas, or Willie Hernan Gomez, so that's where we are right now. The divide is clearly there, which is why it's fascinating to see what they do going forward from a rational standpoint, not listening to the Gen Z version of the fan base. But I do think they have some decisions to make. And look, do you want to you tell me where you want to go with this, Sam? I'm ready to have either conversation, the Cat conversation, the Brunson conversation, the Tom Thibodeau conversation. Which one do you want to have?
I don't think there's a Brunson conversation.
I was going to say, I will not partake in a Brunson conversation.
Oh, I don't want to either. Believe me.
If we're going there, I'm hitting mute and drinking my coffee because Brunson's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Look, like as much as I dislike small guards in general, like as a team building strategy, I'm fine with having him is the guy. I do think there are overarching questions that they are going to have to figure out here in terms of their long-term build, and they probably have to answer them this summer. The first question to me is Mikal more than Towns, honestly, because I am sure that Mikal is expecting an extension of some sort. Like Towns, like you can figure out what you want to do with Towns. And obviously it's important in terms of like the team build that you have to figure out what you want to do with Towns. And we'll talk about this when we do I think we're recording the Knicks offseason preview tomorrow. It'll go up later this week. But I am curious to get your opinion on this, Andrew. Like the Mikal Bridges extension is 4 years, $156 million. Like that's the max. Is it? I would imagine he's going in, given that they just paid OG over $40 million. Mikal's probably going in expecting, hey, I want the full number. I mean, do you give this to him? Do you decide to move? Like trying to figure out how you handle the Mikal situation is probably actually the most pressing thing to me, more so than the Towns decision. Actually,
there's layers to it. I would say I saw the highs and the lows of Mikal Bridges all throughout the playoffs. He was brilliant in the Boston series, the master of the mid-range. I wish he would just take a layup if the layup's available. My guy, contact. I know the Iron Man streak exists. You're allowed to risk it every now and then because Andrew Nembhard is in front of you at the rim. And I didn't know fadeaway layups existed until I watched him play for my basketball team. Having said that, I think Jalen Brunson takes the extension early so that you have the flexibility to extend Mikal Bridges this offseason. I will say, and I'm not an insider, and I'm sure you've heard similar things, though, Sam, that they will consider options. These are also conversations that I was hearing about before the playoff run that they just had, and before he was so essential to beating Boston. And look, just to talk about his play in this series against the Pacers, hot and cold, his when he's hitting his mid-range shot, he's a very deadly weapon on offense. When he's not, you really need him to hit his threes. And when he's not doing that, he really needs to be defensively one of your best players. And when he's not that, then what are you doing? So, like, the up and down of the Pacers series hurts. I will say that unless you can find a significant upgrade, you traded what you traded for him, that you should probably extend him. Like, it's just bad PR if you're like unsure to extend a guy that you traded your entire draft capital to your little brother across the river. So I think you kind of have to go all in with this core, which leads to other conversations. If you can get creative, if there's some big fish hunting that requires you trading Mikal Bridges to get something so you can get the other big fish in here, then fine. If that's not available, there's no like trade him so you can get 2 picks back and then you at least have some draft capital to go get some. No, like, there's a way this can still work. And they did just get to, again, 6 wins away from a title with Mikal Bridges not having his best first year in New York. It could maybe even be a better second year. So I would say you extend him.
Is it the full number?
I would imagine he goes in demanding the full number. And
he has the leverage too. Think?
I mean, if there's wiggle room, Brock Aller will find it. OG took less. Josh Hart took less.
Jalen took less, obviously.
So Jalen took the max, but he took the
max number, but early. Took it early.
Right. So like I don't know if Mikal takes less. Maybe if his Villanova brethren, his CAA family can convince him to. I would assume he's going to take the full max, though. The OG precedent is fascinating that he took less than the full max than what he could have gotten. But I would assume he's getting the max at least.
I mean, for what it's worth noting that Mikal is not CAA. Mikal is Excel.
Really? I didn't know that. I thought Mikal was CAA.
No, Mikal's rep by Excel. So like slightly different. Honestly, I think makes it even like a little bit more complicated because if it's CAA, you can kind of keep it all in the family a little bit in terms of like, okay, if we're going to quietly shop him, like, let's do this quietly, right? With like a different agency being involved, it could be a little bit more complicated because if they find out, there will probably be hurt feelings. And that's if they decide to do that, which I don't know if they will yet. Look, I don't know what to do with Mikal. I think that number is very aggressive, honestly, for what we saw from Mikal Bridges this year. But they also don't really have another option. Like they don't have another solution here to go and get somebody else. So like he still shot 50, 35, 81 and averaged like 18 points a game. And like the defense is weird. Like he is a really good wing defender now. It used to be that he was like this versatile, switchable defender. If he has to guard guards, which honestly, like the Knicks need a guy who can go out and be like their primary defender on lead guards and like offensive initiators. I don't think he does that well. Like he does not defend guards well. He does not get through screens well at this point in his career. And that's my biggest issue with him in general is if it's a wing like a Jason Tatum or somebody like that, he's actually better suited to guarding those players than he is the Halliburtons, the Cade Cunninghams, the guys like that. How does that adjust your team build? And can you work within that structure? I think you can work within that structure for what it's worth. Like, I actually think it's okay. I think he's gotten strong enough to where he can manage those bigger, more physical players reasonably well with his length. It's more do you think that do you think OG can just take all of those assignments? And do you need to find a different fit defensively who can also provide what you need offensively?
So I just wanted to throw at you guys because, like, whenever I think Mikal Bridges trade, I think turn him into 3 rotation players, not turn him into a star. Like, when I look at the Knicks, I'm like, I wish they had more off the bench. I wish there was other options to go to. You know, like that was always my pushback with taking Josh Hart out of the starting lineup is like, okay, well, tell me who I should believe in. Like, I know Deuce was incredible a year ago. I don't think he had quite that magical run this season. I'm not saying like true, like just like role players, but I'm like, is there a world where Brunson's the dude? Let's say we still believe in Cat as the number 2. OG is your number 3, like just incredible offense, defense player. And then now we go get 2 more starters. We turn Bridges into 2 starters that space the floor so we can have 5 out. Now Hart is off the bench, and then maybe another rotation piece of, you know what I'm saying? Like, is there a world where that's the move?
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything for your offseason preview. So I do want to let you guys have the conversation with in depth, with the graphics, with everything when it's time. As far as how Mikal and his long-term fit here relates to how they played in this series, I think you saw it when Tibbs surprisingly went into his bench and turned campaign into Landry Shamet and DeLon Wright, and you got like a game and a half to 2 games of positive play. And then last night, watching in game 6, and DeLon Wright can't hit an open shot, and Landry Shamet is getting lost on defensive coverages, and Mikal Bridges actually played, I thought, a pretty good game 6 outside of the turnovers, which I'm not going to blame only him for their turnovers when everybody and their mother was turning over the ball last night. To your question, Bryce, about turning him into a rotation piece, they are already at 7 deep. I would love a 2 guard that sends, but like everybody would love a 2 guard that is like really good on defense and can shoot the ball. It's literally what everybody is looking for in the NBA. It's honestly the best argument for Deuce that he can be the point of attack defender that Josh Hart wasn't this year. And then you have Mikal and OG Anunoby as your wings, and they're just playing free safety and making it impossible to penetrate throughout the game. I'm assuming if Tom Thibodeau is back next year, which I think he will be, that he's not going to play 2 small guards because he never he's always going to pick the bigger player over the better player, which is why after Josh Hart fouled out in game 4, we got a Landry Shamet sub instead of Deuce McBride, which sent the entire Knicks verse into craziness. They're already at 7 deep is my point. So if you're adding 1 player with your tax MLE, and then you need one of the rookies to pop, so whether it's a Porty or a Tyler Kolek or a Dadier, you got a lot. You got everything you could have wanted from a campaign minimum contract. Like, he helped you win 1 game in the playoffs against the Pistons. That's you already won, by getting that from him, even though he ended up out of the rotation. That's really where I'm at. Is you talked about the coaching mismatch during your Pacer conversation. The fact that
we're going there next. Give me 1 second here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Weird trade idea that we'll get into more when we do off-season preview. Mikal Bridges for PJ Washington and Max Christie. Does that make the Knicks better?
Are the Knicks getting any draft capital in that, or is it just players?
Maybe something small. They can get a first rounder back or something. Won't be. I
like Max Christie.
Crazy.
Who's the coach?
I like Christie and I like PJ.
Who's the coach when you're making this trade?
It's Tibbs. I mean, I think Tibbs is there. Like, it is.
Is Josh Hart coming off the bench? Is Max Christie coming off the bench?
I think Christie comes off the bench for sure.
Yeah,
is PJ Washington coming off the bench?
PJ starts at the
next question.
No, yeah. PJ starts, right?
I would start PJ and OG. Yeah.
What is Tibbs doing? Not what we're doing. What is Tibbs doing? Not what are we
with that core? He'll start Brunson, Towns, OG, probably PJ. I would guess he starts Hart and brings Christie and Deuce off the bench. Whether, like, look, it was reported by James Edwards. Shout out the icon. James reported that like Josh Hart said, like, I am happy to come off of the bench. Now, like, will that be a real thing throughout the entirety of the season? I don't know the answer to that. But if you can start one of Deuce or Max and Josh is happy to come off the bench and be like the best sixth man in the league, or like one of the best sixth man in the league, that's interesting to me at that point.
It is to me too. I agree with you. He did send Josh Hart to the bench for a center. I don't think he's playing the smaller lineup that maximizes the offense.
Yeah, but
he's
it made sense, right? To play two bigs against a team that doesn't play up and down really fast.
My question would be,
defense isn't an issue.
My question would be, yes, I agree with you, but is PJ big enough and physical enough that he gets kind of the best of both worlds?
Maybe. I still think Josh Hart is, look, this whole season has devolved into a Josh Hart conversation where I agree with you, Bryce. If I didn't already own a Brunson jersey, if I were to buy a next Knicks jersey, it would be a Josh Hart jersey. The epitome of the heart of your team, quite literally, right? And he got overexposed. He is a 25 to 28 minute player, and they played him close to 40 the majority of the season. And it's because he speaks to the identity and philosophy of a Tom Thibodeau. The hard-nosed, high energy, 110% at every moment, strong rebounder from a guard position. And all that stuff's great in 25 to 30 minutes. And it doesn't maximize your team's highest ceiling when it's, 35 to 40. And we saw it, honestly, I thought they kind of killed the energy from him throughout the rest of the series when he suddenly became a bench player. It's very ineffective the last 3 games of the series. So it's why I ask you, like, if you keep throwing me trade ideas, I have to not say what I would do. I have to try and think, how would the coach of the Knicks implement the roster as a result?
Yeah, I think my theory was that PJ might be big enough to where Tibbs gets the best of both worlds, was my theory.
Real quick, it broke my heart literally to have to call Josh Hart out for the backdoor he gave up in game 1. Like it literally ripped my heart out. And then now for the rest of my life, I will notice every time I watch a game and Josh Hart gets backdoored, and it happens way too much for somebody that I love as a player. And that's where it's like, he may be he's all the things you said, GMAC, and you know this, like I defend Josh Hart to the brink. The defensive impact isn't that great. Like whenever we talk about like defense and this is what Tibbs wants and all of that, like it's not that great, even though the rebounding is awesome. And I think he makes like winning plays with some of that stuff. It is a real struggle there. You're right. You explained it perfectly in terms of the minutes he needs to play for a team.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The Tibbs conversation, which like we haven't had yet, the Tibbs conversation is like kind of easy to me. Like they just made the conference finals. They just beat the Celtics and we're up 3-1 with Tatum. I don't think you can fire him at the end of the day. I have been as critical as of Tibbs in the Indiana series as anybody you will find. I was very critical of Tibbs in the Detroit series as well. They made the fucking conference finals, guys. Like, I think you have to keep him, and I think you have him on a short leash to start the year. Like, that's what this is to me. If it seems like, hey, this was the ceiling of what we are, getting to the conference finals with Tibbs, and we have to move on early in the season, totally get it. Wash your hands of it and move on. But I think you got to give him a summer and see if this can get figured out in terms of the roster, because at the end of the day, like, I still think this is a flawed roster. It's kind of the reality here, and we're going to talk about that momentarily too.
Bryce, where are you on the Tibbs conversation?
So I kind of lean towards Sam as well, while also throwing out the caveat that I feel like we came on a lot of lives after Knicks games and disagreed with Tibbs' process. Even regardless of results, it was like, oh, they started the game better with the 2 big lineup. But all jokes aside, it makes no sense to me to go 2 bigs against the Indiana Pacers. And I mean, I have so many notes about not 1, but 2 guys now that their idea is to get back to the paint first and then the mat, and all of that. And so in between, because I don't have the words to support him other than they just made the conference finals. And it's somebody that is kind of prides himself on being process driven and not results driven. I don't like that being my main argument for him staying, even though I understand why it is an argument for him staying.
He's an enigma to try and evaluate, because to the majority of people that may stand for Tibbs, their argument is usually scoreboard. Like, look where you are, where you were for the last two decades, and they've progressed every year of the Brunson era. They won 2 games in the second round against the Heat. They won 3 games in the second round against the Pacers the next year. They made it to the conference finals the next year with him at the helm. Like, everybody keeps saying he can't take you to the next level, and they keep going to the next level. And then there's all the process stuff that I acknowledge and I feel, and I think it's okay to say he had a very rough conference finals against the Pacers.
Yeah.
But if his job was in jeopardy, he saved it by the job he did against the Celtics, especially those first 2 games.
Let me ask. So, Sam, we both think Rick Carlisle is a top 5, if not top 3 coach in the NBA. So I guess my thought here is, how many guys weren't going to get outcoached by Rick Carlisle in the conference finals? And how many of those guys, now the argument may not be getting outcoached by Rick Carlisle. It's like, how many guys wouldn't have got outcoached that badly by Rick Carlisle? But how many of those guys are available that aren't just going to get, like, because that's the thing. It's not just firing Tibbs. The other part of the equation is who steps in there. And then now this guy, does he fit this roster and all of that as well?
Can I ask you guys, do you think Atkinson got outcoached by Carlisle?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, like while Bryce was talking, actually.
Because
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think it was nearly to the extent that Tibbs did, but I think the answer is yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because that is a name that gets brought up a lot in the Knicks world, that we could have had Coach Atkinson if you fired Tibbs a year ago. Or
that's interesting.
So, like, the Kenny Atkinson argument, that one of Kenny Atkinson's assistant coaches, Johnny Bryant, used to be with the Knicks as the assistant coach. Now, I'm going off of what I've been told and my understanding of how the Knicks operate. The idea that the Knicks' offensive identity disappeared when Johnny Bryant left couldn't be farther from the truth, because Tibbs is like the one that calls the plays, and then his assistants are the humans that talk to the other humans, because he doesn't know how to talk to humans. It's like, all right, you go be the people persons to our players. I will, like, spend overnight watching film at Tarrytown, New York. You know, having said that, like, the offensive creativity and the flowers that got thrown at the Cavs is deserved. And then I go back to scoreboard. Like, Tibbs's team made it further in the playoffs this year. So I understand both arguments. It's why I land where Sam is, that I would welcome a change if the Knicks decided to just be like, no, we think we should have won this series and you lost it, and we're going to now make an effort to be more creative. And more specifically, creativity, I think, is a tough word to use with Tibbs, because no, he's not creative, but he's effective. The flexibility that's required this late in the playoffs. And, like, he's obviously a good coach. Anybody that calls him a bad coach is just like, you're telling on yourself about your intelligence level. But as far as, like, his flaws and his rigidity and his stubbornness and his lack of being able to be flexible, those flaws are magnified the later into the playoffs that you go.
Correct.
Which is why a Rick Carlisle that's getting positive contributions on his roster from a Ben Shepherd and a Tony Bradley and a Jarris Walker and a Thomas Bryant, like, we're going to 13, 14 guys before Tibbs played a 9th person in this series. And that is the difference in philosophies, that you spent all year playing this mediocre starting 5, changed it with 3 games left in the season, apparently, or 4 games left in the season, because Josh Hart finally told you to. And it didn't even work because you played the wrong one. Like, you didn't do the one that actually matched up with the Pacers the best. So it's why my fairest evaluation is, you had a rough conference finals, and I would welcome a new head coach, but they also got to the conference finals for the first time in 25 years under your leadership.
Correct.
And I think you deserve at least another transaction cycle if they were to give it to you.
The last point here I want to get to is this roster just, like, inexorably flawed? with Towns and Brunson.
Yeah.
Is the combo, right? Maybe that's what we'll save for the offseason preview, is just like, is this thing flawed in terms of the build itself? It's hard to move one of those two coming off the seasons that they did, I think. They just made the conference finals. They're both all NBA players. Like, they have both been really, really terrific. I do wonder if it limits your ceiling a little bit, because the deeper you get into the playoffs, it is harder and harder to be able to mitigate the concerns that those two have defensively when they're on the court together. And I don't know what to make of that yet. I'm still trying to navigate it in my head. Maybe it is a different coach, right? Like, maybe that is what it takes. It takes a different coach to be able to come in and figure out a way to, run a defensive scheme that isn't coming to my head immediately, but like, I'm not as smart as most NBA coaches. Like, maybe there is one that you could figure out with all of these wings and with, a trade for depth in some other way, shape, or form, or whatever you do. It's an important conversation, the Brunson Towns thing.
No, this one is hard for me because I hate my analysis to be like, this team that just lost in the Eastern Conference Finals is still going to, like, what is, if they didn't make a move, and obviously we don't know the entire landscape of the offseason, they are the what favorite team in the East entering next year?
Top 3.
Second.
I was going to say probably. Second, right?
Yeah.
Second or third. Cleveland, Indiana, New York, right?
It's those 3. Yeah.
It's going to be those 3.
Yeah.
It's like, so to me, it's a little bit like you put yourself in a position with a roster of guys that are under 30 right now to give yourself a chance every single year. Like, to me, that's not an awful strategy to say that for 6 straight years until these guys really get into their mid-30s, and you probably have them all under contract until then, other than Hart, I think, depending on what you do with his contract. This is a team that is good enough every single one of those years to go compete, especially apparently if you don't hit the Pacers, right? Or maybe you figure out how to overcome the mighty Pacers. But it's like, part of me is like, sign me up. You're telling me I have a team that for 6 years is going to be a top 3 potential Eastern Conference team? Sign me up. And I'll bet on one of those years we quote unquote hit luck. And we talked about luck earlier in the podcast. It's not the way people, I'm not saying luck in that way, but Josh Hart gets hot from 3, or Bridges gets hot from 3, or Cat has a great defensive series, or if it is the Pacers that are their kryptonite, they don't match up with the Pacers, whatever it is, and you go get one, it's hard for me to turn that down and potentially trade an all NBA player and have no idea what the return is going to be and how that's all going to mesh together.
So, Sam, you and I, after the Cavs were eliminated by the Pacers, we had a conversation about the 2 small guards and whether that blueprint wasn't worth building around, or do you have to shake it up? And you don't want to step on the offseason preview, but I put out how my philosophy is when evaluating any team's playoff run, and it's that all playoff runs are created differently. Like, how many Nuggets conversations were had when they were losing in the first round? Do you wait on Jamal Murray to get healthy, and are they wasting Jokic's prime? And do you need a new coach in Mike Malone? And then it broke right the 1 year because the matchups broke right 1 year for them. Where honestly the team that gave them the biggest struggles that postseason was the first round against the Timberwolves, who then eliminated them the following season.
And then everyone's down this year on Denver, and they're going to give Oklahoma City certainly the biggest problems in the Western Conference.
Right. So I don't I'm with you, Bryce, in that the Knicks will still be considered a top 3 team going into next season. There are other teams that could show up out of nowhere. Maybe Detroit takes a leap. I'm just going to say the word Philadelphia, and then we can all decide what we all think could happen with Philadelphia. Who knows what happens with Milwaukee? But there's a world where the Knicks, because the Bucks and Pacers, correct me if I'm wrong, were a game apart in the standings, right?
Yeah.
So there was a world that also the Knicks and Pacers were a game apart in the standings. So the path could have been different, where the Pacers maybe get knocked off earlier because they're playing a different team.
Yeah,
early
or
on.
like Tyrese Halliburton's back acts up.
Right.
So, and like there's
the
an issue
Celtics
there.
run
Like, totally.
last year where
Yep.
they go through the playoffs and it's a Heat team without Jimmy Butler and a Cavs team that loses Mitchell after 2 games and a Pacer team that isn't the Knicks, who were like peaking and were built, and then you had all their injuries popped up, but then Halliburton goes down after 2 games, and then they're playing not the Nuggets and not the Thunder in the finals. They're playing a Mavericks team who is very good, but they were able to shut down the 5 seed in the Western Conference instead.
Yeah.
And so like the every playoff run is different, and you want
to
like
do you think Oklahoma City went into the playoffs thinking that they're going to get Indiana in the finals?
Exactly. Like they're this whole season about 60-win teams and like what OKC against Boston, are we ready for it? And they get Indiana instead. So that's where I would evaluate the Knicks, to your point, Bryce, with if you think you can get to this point again with the current roster, with the current landscape of the East, then there's no blow it up button. There's tweaking, there's reloading.
Yes. I'm not saying like run it back. My other thing, like, I don't think this is going to happen. We'll get into it. What if the Pacers go and win the NBA Finals? Like, you lost. Not only were you 6 games away, you lost to the NBA champions.
Yeah.
It's like you really blow it up because you had to play the NBA champs and you blew game 1. You know, like, who knows how much different that series goes if that disastrous fourth quarter, last final, 3 minutes in overtime doesn't happen. Well, you know what I mean? I mean, it
2
did.
2 minutes and 55 seconds to be exact. Yeah, when they're up 14. Yeah, sorry.
It did happen. Well, they're also down 8 with 40 seconds. Like all the, but sorry. But you know what I mean? Like it did happen. It's part of the equation. But it's just like how you can make an argument they were real freaking close, Sam.
And they were really close, coming off of having acquired Karl Anthony Towns in October.
Sure.
Like they did not have any time to like get this thing together in the offseason.
Right.
And certainly the Pacers acquired Pascal Siakam at midseason last year, and they were quite solid in the playoffs. Like they're quite good. They made the Eastern Conference Finals last year, certainly. Is there a chance that like the increased continuity of having Towns and having these guys having played together for another year helps increase that chance as well?
So I realized I didn't even answer your question, Sam, about like the build of Brunson and Towns together. And like maybe my point is more like maybe next year they don't play a team that specifically like hammers that weakness over and over again, and with the way that the Pacers create that disadvantage with both of them on the floor. By game 2, it was very obvious they can't share the floor together, and they're your 2 best offensive players. I will say that my takeaway from most of this season was that there's a very weird fit with both of them. We talked about this during the Pacers series. Their crunch time offense just being cat go space the floor was for me unacceptable, and it's why Brunson won Clutch Player of the Year, because he was just like Josh Hart pick and roll and please make tough shots, and he made a ton of them. But it's why people were wondering if a new head coach that's maybe more creative or plays more 5-out lineups and boosts the offense a bit would make more sense. And it's why going forward, I'm curious what they do to add to the roster and the margin moves. Do they need to go get another starter so Josh Hart goes back to the bench to be more impactful and make those lineups and that tandem more sustainable? I will just say, this is the last thing I'll say on this. There is something to what the Pacers did, not specifically team building wise, but their path to the finals. They get to the conference finals for the first time since 2014, last season. They lose in 4 to the Celtics, blowing game 1. Like, let's remember how the Pacers lost game 1 last year. 2 turnovers in the last 45 seconds when they had a 2-possession lead, that Jaylen Brown 3 in the corner, and then they lose in overtime. And then they have fourth quarter leads at home in game 3 and 4 with 1 minute left, and they blow both of those games. That learning experience, that hunger coming back the next season, and then the path opens up for you. What happens to the Cavs? You're on this run where you haven't lost back-to-back games since early March. The Knicks hand you game 1 in this series in the way that they did, and you were opportunistic in stealing the first 2. Like, there is something to you learn from when you don't win. And I wonder if this is a learning opportunity for the Knicks to come back with the same core and retool and go get it. So I'm open to that timeline playing out. Having said that, to your point about how close they were to the Pacers, Bryce, I will be thinking about game one for the foreseeable future until this team makes a finals, because that was
tough.
Guys, they were up 8 with 36 seconds left, and like the probability charts, the stats of like 994-0 when teams are up 14 with 2.5 left. Yeah, it's the worst loss in Knicks history. And unless this core makes it to a finals, we will be thinking about that game one for the foreseeable future. That's my opinion, by the way. I know when you guys reacted to it that you have, what was it, game 7 of the finals, Sam, that you have as higher than that one?
Yeah, that was my theory. It's just if you're in game 7 of a finals and you lose, it's real tough.
There's still a banner that gets hung in Madison Square Garden for conference champs. And like, there is some kind of respect to losing to Hakeem. Like, you lose game 7 on the road of a series you weren't, like, you lost to a Hall of Famer that won the MVP that year. You were favored to win this series, and you were riding the energy of what you just did to Boston, and that disappeared for the rest of the playoffs. Like, the vibes of the city, we were just all on pins and needles. Guys, they were up by 18 with 2 minutes left in game 5, and I'm sweating. Like, are they going to do it again? Like, is Carlisle going to put somebody in that's going to make 7 threes all of a sudden? So, like, all of the momentum that they had disappeared, and the series completely shifted after that. So that's why the outlook of a potential trip to the finals changed after that game, which is why I would rank it higher.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, GMAC.
Hold on, is GMAC leaving? Is he leaving? Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Completely random topic. I want you both to answer off the top of your head. Sam, Chris texted me this the other night, and he asked me to ask you guys this question. When you think of Ty Lue, what's the first thing you think of Ty Lue?
Champ.
Okay.
What did you say?
When you think of Ty, what do you think is the thing?
No, what did Andrew say?
Oh,
champion.
What's the first thing you will think of when you think of Ty Lue?
Definitely the Allen Iverson step over.
Okay, so this is okay. GMAC, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 36. Give me 37. I remember the step over. I'm just
okay. Interesting.
I'm thinking of him as I thought of him as a potential Tibbs replacement.
Okay, so Sam, that was my answer as well, and that's Chris's answer as well. And Chris's point was, like, where is the cutoff? That's why I think it's interesting that wasn't yours, GMAC, because I think most people in our age range would think of that also. And then so I wonder, where's the age of people who don't even really realize that clip and only think of him as either a coach or you know what I mean? Like, it was an interesting question. I'm not trying to throw shade at Ty Lue. Like, it's an iconic. It's a really good question. Yeah, he's an incredible coach, but
yeah, it speaks to the point that Andrew was making earlier about Knicks fandom in terms of like the youth of people.
Yes,
who haven't gone through the sadness before. So it kind of brings this around in a really interesting full circle way.
I'll also like qualify it. A Knicks content creator that's been thinking about who could potentially replace Tibbs for the past 5 months is not the person to ask. When the Knicks won game 1 against Boston, we had a watch party in New York City, and I spent the entire first half as Boston's building their 20-point lead trying to tell people there that Tibbs is not our Mark Jackson, that he's much better than that. He's much more qualified than that, has accomplished. He's accomplished more than that. And the comp that you want to go to is going from Doc Rivers to Ty Lue, if you could. A good coach to another good coach that might be younger and more creative. It's why, like, Ty Lue to me has been the name that if the Clippers ever were to let him go, that's the guy I would love for the Knicks to go after. Obviously, if you said, what about Ty Lue as a player, I would think about, I was 13 years old and one of the biggest Allen Iverson fans in 2001. So I would absolutely think of that step over. It's ironic that I was such a huge AI fan as a kid, and now I can't stand the city of Philadelphia. Funny how that happens.
I find it ironic that Allen Iverson is my favorite player of all time, and we play nothing alike. That's what I tell people all the time. Like, take Allen Iverson's game, and that's my favorite player of all time. That's who I looked up to. And then imagine the complete opposite way of playing basketball, and that's who I was as a player. So
shooting sleeve?
Shooting sleeve? No, I wasn't allowed to wear
Okay.
extra gear. My dad is very old school, so
gotcha.
That's what makes basketball like so great, though.
It truly is, Sam.
It's like such an inclusive like environment where everybody is, on equal pegging on the court, until you get proven to be better or worse than somebody, obviously. But like, it just brings all of those cultures together in so many different ways, and such an interesting melting pot.
Me and Chris are living in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, the smallest podunk town you can imagine. And we are just looking up to and living through Allen Iverson as like our favorite player. And it's like, like probably couldn't have grown up any differently, us and Allen Iverson, all the way across the country and all of that. And he's just like this dynamic athlete. And we're, like it just, but I thought it was a fun question. Like when we said, because my immediate answer was the AI step over. And again, no disrespect to Ty Lue, but it's just like, it truly is an iconic moment in my mind that I will always remember. So I wanted to ask.
All right, GMAC, we're getting you out of here. Shout out to you. Shout out to Knicks Film School. Go tell the people about it, please, before you leave.
Find Knicks Film School on YouTube. We just hit 30,000 subs during the conference finals. So we thank you to the Knicks for giving us the playoff run to ride the coattails of, and hopefully we continue to do that throughout a very busy off season. So look for Knicks Film School on YouTube, on the podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We will have wall-to-wall coverage of the off season, our newsletter on Substack, our Patreon. And I will just say one thing before I go, as you guys are about to preview the finals. So 2 things. One, congratulations to the Indiana Pacers and to Caitlin Cooper and to my buddies over at the Setting the Pace podcast. It's really cool that people in this industry that I respect, Scott Agnes, your newsletter I get every day, even though I hate read it throughout this conference finals. So bravo to the brilliant people that will now get to cover the NBA finals. I wish you nothing but success in your coverage. And last but not least, go Thunder.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Andrew, it's good to see you. We're going to talk about the preview though. Now, before we do that, Bryce and I are going to shout out our good friends over at SKIMS. We all have many complaints about our underwear, be it comfort, fit, having to shop for it, the trial and error and the guesswork of trying to shop for underwear. But I can tell you that SKIMS is going to solve all of those problems for you. Even though I wear underwear every day, it had been a while since I switched up the type of underwear that I had used. For those who haven't heard yet, SKIMS now offers men's underwear, and I'm here to tell you it's absolutely worth the hype. When I tried the SKIMS stretch boxer briefs, it felt like I finally found the missing link. They give me all the movement I need for working out without feeling like I'm walking around in gym clothes the rest of the day. Plus, they don't lose shape. They don't ride up. They make it way easier for you throughout the course of your day. Shop SKIMS Men's at skims.com. Let them know that we sent you here. After you place your order, you're going to select podcast in the survey, select Game Theory podcast in the drop-down menu that follows. We'll also have a link in the description as well. Go to shop at skims.com, skims.com, skims.com. Let them know we sent you. Shout out to SKIMS. Okay. Let's talk about the NBA Finals, Bryce. We're going to preview this thing and get into it now. The Indiana Pacers were swept by the Oklahoma City Thunder in the regular season. The Pacers were fully healthy for the most part in those games, outside of, I believe it was the second game that Ben Mathurin missed. He was really the only guy that they didn't have in either of those games. Chet did not play in either of those games. And the Oklahoma City Thunder still won. They won one of them by 6. They won the second one in March by 21 points. And that one in March was while the Pacers were still really trying to compete and get their seeding up in order to not be, they weren't in the play-in at that point, but to, at the very least, to hopefully try and get home court advantage throughout the playoffs. And ultimately they fell short of that against the Knicks by being the 5 seed, if I remember correctly. 5 seed or 6 seed? Pacers, I can't remember.
No, 5, because they played the Cavs.
5.
So
right. That's right. So I am very interested to see what kind of adjustments the Pacers can make.
They were 4, Bucks were 5, but not the 3. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm very interested to see what kind of adjustments that the Indiana Pacers can make from those games in order to potentially make the final or beat the Thunder in the finals. It does feel like a tough matchup to me on its face for the Pacers. I'm not going to lie to you. It feels like a very concerning matchup for them.
Yeah, I mean, so I went through this today, and obviously the first thing you start looking at is matchups. And when you start with the Thunder, the first thing to me is who is going to take the SGA matchup. So I guess I would like to start there. Is it Nembhard is going to get this matchup, you think, with SGA to start games?
I think you have to, because I think that Nesmith has to guard J-Dub. If it's like, I think that Nembhard will get like blown through by J-Dub. Like, I think J-Dub's one of those dudes that's like just strong and will cause him problems.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at as well. And listen, I think I would have been a little more nervous about that until what I saw Nembhard do with Brunson in game 6. Like that gave me a little bit of confidence in this matchup. But obviously SGA is just he won MVP of the league for a reason this year. And so then it comes down to like other matchups in terms of, Siakam and Turner against the Oklahoma City Bigs, obviously. And that matchup is interesting as well. Turner on Hartenstein, I assume, is what we'll get there. Siakam on Chet will be a really interesting one. And then even like Halliburton on Dort, in terms of Dort is a sneaky good offensive rebounder, which is going to, force Halliburton to be good on the boards, boxing out, those type of things. And then obviously when you get into the sub, so like when OKC goes small, Sam, and now Turner has to guard Chet, we just saw what Cat did to Turner off the bounce from the top of the key. And I just wonder, like, is OKC going to be able to spam SGA, Chet, top of the key, pick and pops, Chet shoots it or attacks Turner closeouts? And so there's some interesting matchups there in terms of Indiana against the OKC offense.
So in the first game, Shea went for 45, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
Against the Pacers in December. In the second game, he went for 33, 7, and 8. Shea caused them a lot of problems this year, unfortunately. In the first game, Jalen Williams had 20. In the second game, he had, let's pull it up here. He ended up with only 18, but Lou Dort went a little bit crazy from 3 in the second game and kind of bumped that up. And then Isaiah Joe also went nuts. We went 5 for 7 from 3. They went 17 of 36 from 3 in the second game of that 2-game not series that they played, but in both of the games that they played this year.
Yeah.
So just from a stylistic perspective here, right?
Yep.
I find it very interesting that the Thunder are matched up with a team in general in the Indiana Pacers that do not really turn the ball over.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yes,
team's top 5 in turnover percentage. Tyrese Halliburton's one of the least turnover prone players in the NBA. He makes incredibly high level decisions all the time. And in the game where the Thunder won by 20, Andrew Nembhard and Tyrese Halliburton only had 1 turnover combined between the two of them. They only turned the ball over 13 times, not like a crazy number. Totally reasonable. I feel like it's going to be hard for the Pacers to consistently initiate offense against this team because of the way that they fly around and rotate defensively, and because of their point of attack defense. They just have so many bodies to throw at Halliburton for 10-minute stretches. You can obviously throw Lou Dort on him. I would imagine that will be the initial plan. You can throw Cason Wallace on him. I would imagine that will happen throughout the series. You could switch Jalen Williams onto him. Obviously, they have the Alex Caruso card to be able to throw out there and make Halliburton's life, attempt to make it miserable with Caruso. thinking about the way that they match up as well, like, do you go big or do you go small, right? And ultimately what you're trying to figure out is like, how do you guard the Halliburton ball screen and all the different variations of ball screens that they will throw? Do you go big and, just say, okay, we're going to play drop with Hartenstein. We're going to have Chet there to rotate. That way we have Chet there to be able to guard Siakam as well and be able to deal with it that way. Or do we decide to go smaller consistently and just like kind of switch 1 through 4 and have, Jalen Williams to be able to deal with Siakam if he switches there, have Alex Caruso be able to switch onto Siakam if he's there, have Lou Dort to be able to switch onto Siakam if he's there,
everybody
Shea to be able to like,
other
at
than
least
SGA,
body up a little bit.
Like with Shea, maybe you bring a double, but like you're probably bringing a double. SGA is going to dig at the ball, and it's like there's a chance it ends up in a turnover, right? Like, I found this debate today, right? Because like I kind of crushed the Knicks deciding to go to the 2 big lineup. I just didn't think it made sense against this Indiana team. So I'm like, okay, do I feel the same way about the Thunder bigs? And I'm not as worried because I think the level of defense from the 2 Thunder bigs is completely different than the level of defense from the 2 Knicks bigs. And even the mobility of Chet, like I still think that they can manage it, but I still wonder if the best minutes for the Thunder in this specific series comes from the single big lineups because they have those non-bigs that can all switch and guard on Siakam. Right. Like that's what's so important here, Sam, is exactly what you said. It's one thing if you go quote unquote small and then give guys for Siakam to target in isolation or whatever transition, but OKC doesn't put many of those guys on the floor. What, SGA and Joe at the, like those are the 2 guys that would play in this series that he could, like he's going to get some occasionally, but those are the 2 that he could consistently maybe attack in mid-post isolation situations. Everybody else is probably going to hold up and at least make him really work for it. And even those 2 guys will, right? Like SGA will do something to make him work for it, or they bring the double or whatever. So Siakam's series will be really, really interesting because they can throw a lot of things at him as well.
I like the Thunder 2 big lineup for this series more than I like the Knicks 2 big lineup for their series and the Cavs 2 big lineup for their series, because the Thunder are much more intentional about not hitting the offensive glass.
Sure.
Like they are just not a team that really crashes in that way. They do really prioritize transition defense. I think that they can probably get away with it a little bit more consistently with the 2 bigs as opposed to the Cavs and the Knicks. Like the Knicks are always going to try and crash with Mitch in there, and Towns, like it's just hard to kind of, get that out of you for a series.
So to your point, real fast, Sam, in the playoffs, offensive rebound percentage, right? Knicks were 4th, Cavs were 5th, Oklahoma City was bottom 6, the bottom half. So like different, and listen, some of that is actually grabbing the rebounds. I understand that that's what that stat is, but there's a lot of philosophy that goes into offensive rebounding percentage and stuff like that. OKC was 21st in offensive rebound percentage in the regular season. So seems like intentionality there in terms of, like you say, the defensive transition and all of that.
Yeah, it's my thing. Like they are just a lot more intentional about how they get back in transition. And the other thing that they don't have any problems with, in the 2 big lineups, they could have some problems with it, but especially when they go small with Chet being the 5 and J-Dub essentially being able to guard Siakam at the 4, they don't really have cross match problems.
Sure. Yep.
Like Dort, Caruso, certainly J-Dub, Chet can obviously deal with Siakam. Like, all of these guys can guard kind of everybody, except maybe you don't want Chet on Halliburton all that consistently, I would argue. I do think Chet is a good defender in space, but Halliburton is very good at getting to his right side and being able to, get paint touches in a way that I think he will find a way to do so against Chet. The other interesting thing here for me will be, where do they decide to pick up Halliburton? The Knicks actually found a little bit more success as that series went on, picking him up further up the court.
Yeah.
and like just trying to make him work a little bit. The Thunder obviously just have a number of players that are able to do that. They have a number of players that are able to just like decide, okay, we're going to, go full out for 5 minutes, be it Caruso, be it Kaysen particularly, I would imagine is somebody that will have success picking up Halliburton a little bit higher up the court. Just trying to get underneath him and not stop him by any stretch. Halliburton's an unbelievable basketball player, but just try and make life harder. You know what I mean? And wear it out a little bit and try to make it work. Right. I'm like somewhat concerned about the Pacers being able to get the kind of cross matches defensively. And like, I'm worried about against the 2 big lineup, like against the 1 big lineup with Chet. Like, I think it's just going to be very, very difficult to be able to find those cross matches in transition in the way that they are so successful at doing. This team to me almost feels like a team that was like constructed to beat the Pacers on some level.
Here's the other, what do we always talk about with Indiana is pace, right? They play with pace. They play with pace. They play with pace. That's not going to bother OKC. OKC can play with pace as well. Like they have no issues with that whatsoever. Actually, in the regular season, by B-ball reference, OKC had a faster pace than the Pacers. Like they were 1 spot above. In the playoffs, NBA.com, OKC 1 spot above the Pacers in terms of pace. So I don't know that like that style is not going to bother OKC. And the other thing is OKC has all the bodies to play with Indiana if it becomes that. I don't know that it's going to be as big because I think there's only 1 game that only has 1 day different or 1 day off. I think all of the other games have 2 days off in between. So it's not like what we've seen here in the conference finals where it was game, day off, game, day off. So we should see some more well-rested teams, but just in general, like energy and wearing down shouldn't be an issue for OKC. Like maybe it was for other teams in terms of their depth and the time off. I mean, it's credit to Indiana as well, right? Like we saw 1 game where they didn't have that relentlessness, but I don't think that pace is going to bother them as much because they're used to playing that pace. And as you said, there's not as many cross matches to find in transition for Indiana.
How do the Pacers deal with their big situation against the Thunder?
I don't know, Sam. Like I'm nervous about
That's a hard one for me. Yeah.
I mean, you brought it up. Listen, I love Miles Turner. I've been singing his praises all year. I thought he was good the first couple rounds of the playoffs. He was not good. I didn't think he wasn't great in the series against the Knicks. And then behind him, it's just like, where do you go? Like, can you go Obi at the 5 more because of what we talked about earlier, where OKC maybe not as much of a offensive rebounding centric team? Can you survive some of those? I think we both have felt like Obi has given them some good minutes. I mean, you can obviously try Thomas Bryant and see if he's knocking down shots. It's a spot that makes me really nervous for them, especially when you're playing a team that's going to bring 48 minutes of really good center play.
Yeah, that's a big issue for me here is we know that Chet particularly likes to play in those like bench units with J-Dub. Right. And that's going to be probably what they do to start second quarters is they'll go to the Chet and J-Dub lineup. And that feels like a real problem for me against Indiana and against that center unit.
Well, and my thing too is like, even though Tony Bradley was giving them good minutes, trying to keep Mitchell Robinson off the boards, I didn't think his ball screen coverage was very good.
Correct.
And even, I think it was game 6, even Thomas Bryant initially, his ball screen coverage was not good. I think he gave up a lob to Robinson, and then there was like a miscommunication where he like played super aggressive at the level and didn't seem like anybody else really realized that's what he was going to do. And I think it was Mitchell Robinson again, ended up just getting a catch and a wide open dunk off the screen and roll. And it's like, Chet can do roll, pop, attack the closeout. We know Hartenstein has the little short roll floater. Like they have bigs that can attack you in the ball screen stuff. So I'm a little bit worried about them being able to defend the actions that OKC can attack them with.
So like here is, I feel like we know what direction this is going to go for us, but like, let's talk about like the Pacers here, right?
Okay.
Let's talk about the advantages that they have. Right. So Owen Phillips, like his F5 newsletter, my goodness, the F5 newsletter has been awesome throughout the playoffs. It's awesome throughout the year. I would fully suggest taking a look at that. But the team with the fewest turnovers in the playoffs this year has gone 53-20, which would be the highest winning percentage for teams in a single playoffs on record. The Pacers are genuinely elite at avoiding turnovers, and they're going into a series where, like, I would argue the biggest key against Oklahoma City defensively is avoiding turnovers and avoiding those pick sixes, because that's when it really starts to like feel like an avalanche against Oklahoma City, right? Sure. Their half court offense is really good. It's not like so good to where you can't overcome it. The issue is that their half court offense is pretty good, and then they also force you into all sorts of live ball turnovers, and they get crazy transition opportunities, and they're able to like just run out and create offense that way. So I wonder if the Pacers, by virtue of playing, great ball here down the stretch of the season, even though we saw them lose by 20 to OKC in March, I wonder if they can limit turnovers and just avoid the way that Oklahoma City wants to play offensively, and avoid the big runs that make the Thunder so unique and difficult to manage.
It's funny. So real quick, Sam, who do you think is first and second in points off turnovers in the playoffs? Teams.
I would guess it's these two.
Want to guess who's number one in opponent points off turnovers in terms of limiting them to the least amount in a game?
I would guess it's Oklahoma City.
It is these two teams. Both the Indiana's actually first.
Really?
And
okay.
So OKC is number one in scoring points off turnovers, and it's actually significantly more than Indiana at 5.3 more. Like Indiana is second, but only 0.8 more than third. Two teams tied for third. But limiting opponents' points off turnovers, Indiana is first by 0.1 over OKC. So to your point, where it seems like OKC is, built to take on this Indiana team, if there is a team in the league, to your point here, that maybe can counter what OKC does best defensively, it could be a Indiana team that doesn't turn it over. Here would be my, not worry, but if it does happen, I'm not worried about Tyrese Halliburton all of a sudden averaging 4 turnovers a game in the NBA Finals. I know he actually had a bad turnover game in Game 6 here against the Knicks, but the 2 games before that, he had 0. I'm a little more nervous on, does Aaron Nesmith try to do too much? Does Benedict Mathurin try to do too much? Does TJ McConnell over dribble into the how much do those guys, the role players, does Carlisle think he has to play Jarris Walker for some reason? Do those guys end up turning it over 10 or 12 times a game between them? And that's enough to get OKC out in transition, a couple of them back to back, and now they've gone on one of those runs. And again, those guys just can't have live ball turnovers. At least have to be dead ball turnovers. Yeah. They cannot be throwing live ball turnovers.
And you brought up Nesmith. I mean, look, Nesmith got hurt in Game 4 of the series against the Knicks.
Yep.
And he's played 16 minutes and 20 minutes in back-to-back games. We just haven't seen him. He hasn't had to run out, or hasn't had to, that's the word, hasn't had to run out a full game of 35 minutes where he's guarding J-Dub, and J-Dub is just bullying his way with his left shoulder, into Nesmith's chest, or where he's trying to deal with Shea, dealing with his balance and body control and everything that he's so capable of as a driver, and trying to get his defender off balance. We haven't seen that yet from Nesmith over the course of a game since he got hurt. Right. And I do hope that these couple of days off here will be able to help Nesmith be completely healthy. Honestly, if I was the Pacers, I would consider sitting him Game 1 if you feel like he's not healthy and you think that the extra 3 days of rest that he would get going into Game 2, because they have 2 days off after Game 1, might be able to really give him some juice for the rest of the series. I would hear that out, at least. I'm sure that's not going to happen probably, but I want to know where Nesmith's health is kind of where I'm at. And honestly, Miles Turner went down the tunnel in Game 2 was that. And I felt after that, he did not move as well. at that point. I have worries about that too against this team. This team is going to pressure you. Like, they're playing a team that similarly hunts mismatches to the way that they do. And they might not be going in quite as healthy as the other team is right now. The Pacers, I mean.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I haven't loved Nesmith's last 2 games. He got in foul trouble in game 6. We talked about earlier where then it became Nembhard's job, and he did a great job having to guard Brunson.
Yep.
I've brought this up with Turner. Like, this is definitely part of my worry about the center rotation in Indiana is I don't think Turner had a great series, especially defensively, where he just could not keep up with Karl-Anthony Towns. And that's where it makes me nervous if you end up with the smaller OKC lineup where Chet is at the 5, him trying to defend someone like Chet, who is that agile and can move that way off the bounce and attacking him from the top of the key. So those things do make me a little bit nervous with Indiana in terms of, like you say, just their health and just whatever those 2 guys are dealing with. It is truly a storyline, but they have 3 days off here, 4 days off here before they play game 1. So maybe those days will be enough for them to rest up and kind of figure all of that out and be healthy and ready to go.
I hope it is, because I think that this should be a fun basketball series at the very least. Like,
yes.
The way that these 2 teams run, the way that Indiana has figured out things defensively, the way that we're going to get like Indiana's incredible fast-paced offense that doesn't turn the ball over against Oklahoma City's unbelievable high-pressure defense that, thrives off of turning the ball over and getting you out in transition, right? There are so many fun little pieces of this series to figure out how it's going to work. I do just wonder if Oklahoma City kind of has them like a bit overmatched.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an awesome series as well. I was talking to our friends. They were over here hanging out before we started recording, and they were just talking about the NBA and how we had taken them to a Nuggets game this year. And so they were talking about how they watched, more NBA this season. I said, I told my buddy that I coach football with, I said, he was a college football player, so he's a football guy, but you want to watch this series. I promise you will appreciate the level of play, the level of intensity, the physicality that both teams will play with, especially OKC, but Indiana plays with some of that physicality as well. Nembhard does, Siakam will. I'm just like, you're going to enjoy these games. And I think it's going to be competitive. I think it's going to be fun. I know who I think is going to win, but that doesn't, it may not even be 7 games worth, but I think how many ever games it ends up being, I think it's going to be competitive. I think it's going to be really fun basketball to watch from both teams. And I'm excited for it. I tried not to say it after a couple games into the conference finals, and I couldn't help myself. I just think this matchup and the styles that these 2 teams play, it's like, which one is going to overcome? Which one is, are we going to have a game where Indiana turns it over a bunch because OKC is just that good defensively? Or are they that good taking care of the ball that it doesn't happen? These are fascinating things to watch.
Look, I think that I think any game where Indiana turns it over a bunch is going to be a problem.
I agree.
Yeah. And then the other piece of this too is like, we got to get 7 games of Tyrese Halliburton just like locked in.
Yes.
Like, he's got to be aggressive all 7. Because if he's not, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it all year. We've said it before other series. Their chance to win this series is Tyrese Halliburton being the best player in the series, or at least being on the same level as SGA. Like, he has to step up to that level. It has to be the right mentality. He has to force the issue in some regard. And it's going to be even harder, Sam, because it's going to be even more physical than what he got in the Knicks series with Lou Dort and with Cason Wallace. But, that's why you're an All-NBA player. That's why you get the credit and the love. Any game where he only takes 7 shots, I think they lose. And that's what he did in game 5. Even in game 6, he took 17 shots. Like, I'm fine with that. But it's got to be 15 plus attempts from Tyrese. And to me, it's a mentality thing. It's not just about him taking shots. It's about a mentality thing. And if he does that, then it does come down to how many you make and how do other guys shoot and all of that. But if we have the, like, okay, I'll kind of let you take me out of this aggressiveness because you're being so physical, and
That's what Oklahoma City does, by the way.
It is absolutely what they do. It makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm hoping Tyrese steps up to the plate in regards to that starting in game one. Like, you got to come out with the right mentality in game one. You cannot let them just like deny you the ball and keep you out of the flow and kind of a non-factor other than, maybe you go get, what do you have, 6 assists in that game or whatever? That can't be it. You got to be the dude. You have to be the dude in this series to give the Pacers a chance.
Yeah, in the second game that Indiana and Oklahoma City played this year, Halliburton had 18, 2, and 3 on 12 shots. In the first game that they played back in December, the day after Christmas, Halliburton had 4 points, 8 assists on 6 shots in 35 minutes. So he's got to be aggressive. Like, he's got to go for it at the end of the day. Like, even though he feels that pressure, that relentless, like, guys getting into his shit and making life like miserable for him, he's got to just be like, okay, I have to be the guy or else we don't win.
Yep. I agree. 100%.
Give me a pick.
Okay, so I hate this because it's going to sound like I don't think it's going to be a competitive series, and I don't believe that.
I know.
I can't go Thunder in 7 because I just think OKC is better. So Thunder in 6 makes more sense, but I think I'm going to go Thunder in 5. I think they close it out at home. So I feel like that's aggressive. I know it's going to come off as disrespectful to Indiana, and I don't mean it to be. Again, I think it's going to be way more competitive than that. I will also say I picked OKC in the preseason. I thought they were going to be awesome. They were awesome in the regular season. They've been awesome in the playoffs, even though Denver took them to 7. I understand it. OKC in 5. I would be disingenuous if I went anywhere else. So,
yeah, I went back and listened to what I did. I basically did not make a pick outside of the Thunder and Celtics was my finals. But at the start of the playoffs, I said I thought the Thunder were going to win.
Yeah,
I think we're underrating how good this Thunder team is historically. They won 68 games this year.
Yep.
They have a genuinely historically relevant defense. Like, it's arguably the best defense of the last 20 years. On top of that, they have an MVP candidate. They have another guy in J-Dub who I think is, on the track to be a genuine, there's a real shot he ends up in the Hall of Fame someday. I don't know if he will or not. Same with Chet. They might have 3 guys that end up in the Hall of Fame at a certain point. We're very early in the other 2 guys, and there's no certainty there at all. But it's not impossible that we look up, given the start of their careers, and that they end up in that kind of discussion in that echelon, right? I also have Oklahoma City in 5.
The other thing, Sam, we've spent a lot of time talking about how Rick Carlisle has outcoached Tom Thibodeau and other situations. I think we have 2 of the top 5, top 3, whatever you want to say, coaches in the NBA. That's a fascinating matchup. I'm really interested if we come on here and it's like, hey, is this a game? Is Dagnall going to respond? Right? That's actually one of those where maybe that ends up being part of why, if Indiana is successful, maybe that is something Carlisle is able to tap into and Dagnall has to respond or whatever. But I don't think we're going into this series thinking there's a major coaching advantage, probably either way. Right? So
look, I think Rick is a coaching advantage, to be honest with you. I do. Dagnall, what I love about Dagnall is the overarching scheme that they have clearly fostered and created. I think in game, he has some moments that still give me some pause occasionally.
Maybe that's an area where if this goes longer or Indiana wins it or whatever, if I had to pick something that could end up being a factor in that I'm not foreseeing or predicting right now, I would say it's because we get on here and we go, man, Carlisle is just masterclass, and man, Dagnall hasn't responded yet, or he hasn't pushed the right buttons, or why is he playing this guy and not that guy, or why is he staying with the 2 big lineup when he should be playing the 1 big? Makes more sense, whatever. I'm just throwing out different options here. That would be a storyline I could see happening if we're 2-2 going to a game 5 and it looks like we're headed for 7 or something like that.
Yep, I think that's right. Okay, Bryce, tell the people where they can find you. Tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky. I am putting out some second round prospects into first round, top of the second round over on the Substack. There's a Pistons flair to it, but you can still get an idea. So I've put out video breakdowns on Maxime Renault, Adu Thiero. I think Ryan Cockbrenner is coming on Monday morning. I'll continue to knock those out. You guys can check those out. It's all free over on the Substack. The Pistons Pulse podcast. We talked a lot about over the cap, under the cap over there, as Sam and I did as well. But we did that with Keith Smith, if you just kind of interested in all of that stuff. Also, shout out Pistons fans. I believe the Pistons offseason preview is the #1 viewed preview of all of ours. But shout out all of you guys, because I know, here's what I do know about the offseason preview, Sam. It's going across fan bases. Like, there are fan bases of this team that's watching it for that team and that team that's watching it for this team. It's incredible. So we appreciate you guys so much for the feedback and the engagement on those. So other than those places, you can find me right here with Sam on the Game Theory podcast.
We appreciate all of you guys immensely for coming and hanging out. Off-season previews. Tomorrow will be Portland. It is the longest one we've recorded yet. The next day will be Sacramento, where we have a lot of questions on what's happening there. I believe that following that, we'll probably do New York and Minnesota. And then we'll kind of go from there and figure out what's going on. Those will go up every day at 12, though. That's the plan. Every day at 12. Those go up, and you guys will get to read them, watch them, listen to them, whatever you are doing. We are so appreciative of you guys hanging out. They are doing so well over on the YouTube channel. Thank you all for coming, subscribing. Hit the subscribe button over on the YouTube channel. Closing in on 40,000 subscribers. So grateful to all of you for coming and hanging out and listening to the show. We will be back later this week. I don't know yet. Bryce and I want to get ahead of the off-season preview window here. So there is a chance that we spend the next 3 days trying to knock quite a few of those out here in order to make sure that we're like not way behind as we get into the finals. At some point in the next 10 days, we will do a mock draft. I don't know if it'll be in the next 3, but at some point after that, there will be one. Final note. I have finished the draft guide for the first year in history. I have written all of it before the end of May. What does that mean in terms of when it comes out? We have a date. That date is not public yet. It is earlier than what it normally is. I am hopeful that you guys will have that much earlier than what you typically do, which sometimes it's like a week before the draft. I'm hoping that like it's way more than a week before the draft this year. Not totally out of my hands, but like somewhat out of my hands at this point, because the design team has to get to it. The editorial team has to get to it, everything. So that will be out at some point over at The Athletic. Go subscribe to The Athletic whenever that comes out. We appreciate you guys for all going over there. That's all we've got. Bryce and I will be back later this week and certainly every day at 12 for you guys doing off-season previews. But until next time, we'll talk soon.